Hello everyone. Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming today to be in the seminar. I know that there's so many really exciting things going on across site today, so thank you for choosing to be here with us. I really, really appreciate it. I'm just really excited and pleased to have you all here, so thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who's joining online. You are so welcome. It's great to have you with us too. And we're going to find lots of ways for you to contribute to our discussion today. So throughout our conversations today, when we're having time for discussion and conversation, please do pop your thoughts into the chat, because we want to hear from you too. You're as part of this conversation as we are, so please do get involved. My name is Mollie Pugmire. I work for All We Can, which is the Methodist Church's international development charity. I've been there since January. And obviously, we're one of the partners at CliffFest this year. So it's really exciting that we can be here and chat with you all. I work as their communications and advocacy officer. So if you follow All We Can online at all, on social media or our blogs or anything like that, chances are that I've had a hand in making that happen. So it's really nice to have you here. I've been with All We Can since January. But before that, I spent 18 months working for the Methodist Church in Britain on a global youth-led campaign which sought to mobilise the global Methodist family on issues of climate justice ahead of COP26. COP26, in case you weren't sure, is the United Nations annual climate change conference. It's called COP because it's attended by the Conference of Parties who have signed on to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or the UNFCCC for short, even though I always say to people, that's not very short. It's really not that helpful. And as that has just indicated, a little bit of a disclaimer, there are lots of, for some reason, abbreviations, kind of like jargony words when we talk about climate change, especially on an international scale. So please feel free, if I don't explain something, shout it out. I should know what it is, because it's really, I hate it when you go to somewhere and people just throwing out all these phrases and words and don't tell you what it means. It's difficult. So do let me know if I say anything that you don't understand. So back to the explanation, because this context is really important. So the first COP1, was in Berlin in 1995, and then COP26, after being rescheduled for a year, took place in Glasgow last November. So it was supposed to happen in 2020, happened in 2021, so it was a long time coming. COP26 was building up to be this really, really, really big, significant moment in climate change discourse, because it was 5 years, but then became 6 years after the historic Paris Agreement of COP21, which sought to keep the global average temperature increase to below 2 degrees and ideally below 2 degrees increase, and ideally below a 1.5 increase. But yeah, even though it ended up being 6 years as opposed to 5 years after Paris, COP26 was the first review of the agreement. So it was a really big moment because we were, for the first time, coming together to properly examine how that had gone and such. So the countries who had signed on to the Paris Agreement were submitting NDCs, which is short for Nationally Determined Contributions, which meant that they were deciding themselves what their goals and their targets were ahead of COP26. So yeah, so I hope this all makes sense. Like I said, it's quite messy and a lot of information, but I feel that it's quite hard to talk about what we did without knowing all of that stuff. So it does take a little while, and if things don't make sense, I understand. I spent 2 years, nearly 2 years on it, and sometimes I'm like, what does this all mean again? So we can chat if things don't make sense in a little while. So during the 18 months that we worked on Climate Justice for All, or CJ for short, I worked with a team of young people from all across the globe. So there was James Appleby, James is on the right there. He's also from Britain. Maima Vai, who is the woman on the left. She is based in Fiji, originally from Samoa. Next to Maima is Jessica Boali. She's from Zambia. And then that's me in the middle. And then to my next along, I'm getting confused with my left and right. That is Camilla Ferrerio. She's from Uruguay. And then behind Camilla is Irene, and she's from Italy. So yeah, it was, and that was actually at COP, and it was the first time that we'd met in 18 months, which was also very exciting. So at the core of Climate Justice for All were our pillars that supported our work and allowed us to be a unique contribution to the global arena of climate discourse. So our pillars were us being global, youth-led and Methodist. CJ for his global nature was exciting because it allowed the global Methodist family to stand together. Bringing together the global Methodist family to share together in this campaign offered a really unique and powerful voice of connectedness and unity to the rest of the world. And beyond the 5 countries that had workers, we also had volunteers from, I think it was about 15 other countries. And we were in agreement that for climate justice to happen, it must be shared globally. And that means listening to the needs and responsibilities of each countries and contexts. So as a global community, the Methodist family had and still have the chance to model the kind of listening and sharing of stories necessary, I think, for climate justice to be achieved. So as I've mentioned, and as this photo might demonstrate, the 6 of us and all of our volunteers were young people. And we felt that this really honoured the commitment young people across the world had made in making the climate crisis a priority for which the general public now pays more attention. And this did not mean that we were only focused on young people, but had hoped that young people would be the leaders of a truly intergenerational movement of Methodist communities who wish to achieve climate justice. Our campaign was inherently Methodist because as Methodists today, we believe that the love of God is shown through our actions and the commitments that we make to ensure that everyone is able to live a full and flourishing life. When the climate crisis is so unjust and so unfair, stopping people from living such a full and flourishing life, we, as Methodists, felt that we must commit to action that demonstrates that we do believe in love and justice for all. So the message of the campaign, we believe in climate justice for all, was really significant to us because it helped us communicate these pillars of the project. First, we wanted to communicate the role of faith in our work, hence the inclusion of we believe. Second, in naming the climate crisis as an issue of injustice, felt right to us as people whose faith tells us to seek justice. And thirdly, in finishing our message with for all, we wanted to remember John Wesley's declaration that God's love was for all, and we wanted to make it very clear that when we seek climate justice, it can't just be for a small number of individuals, but it had to be for everyone. The call of the campaign is in 2 parts because we grappled with our diversity of experience as a global team, some of us coming from high-emitting countries and some of us coming from countries who were on the front lines of the climate crisis today. So we felt that one single response didn't really do any of this justice. So we were calling for two things. We were calling for equipping and fairness. Equipping looked like equipping those on the front lines of the climate crisis, and fairness was about the highest emitters being the most ambitious to reducing carbon to net zero. So to take climate action and move towards this call and this goal, we were inviting the Global Methodist family to do three things in the run-up to COP26: to listen, to call, and to commit. The global nature of climate justice for all meant that these three asks allowed the Global Methodist family to take action together, whilst acknowledging how these asks were going to look and thrive differently in each country and context. And so to ensure that the campaign thrived in each country, we wanted participants to take ownership over what these asks looked like. So, for example, what it meant to make a commitment within a British context is obviously going to look really different from what it means in India. And finding a way to successfully call on ambassadors in the United States was going to look different from how it would in Zambia. We wanted the Global Methodist family to feel connected, powerful and unified, and we believed that we would honour our cultural diversity if we empowered each country to take ownership of how that was done. So first, the listening part of our asks. So as a team, when we listened to one another's stories and shared our experiences and stories of the climate crisis, we realised and acknowledged that telling our own stories and listening to others is a really, really important tool for learning about and responding to the effects of the climate crisis. To enable Methodist communities to listen and learn effectively from one another, we released monthly short films and worship resources which told the stories of different communities all over the world and their experience of climate action and or climate change. The films were accompanied, as I said, by worship resources, and these were all written by people within the country that the film covered the stories of. And it really helped as a tool for people and communities to more deeply engage with the contents and the themes that the films covered. So these resources look like things like prayers, discussion questions, scripture, and eco-reflection, and could be used on a Sunday morning in a service or in small groups, and even by yourself. And these resources are still up on our website, which is hosted. I can give everyone the link at the end and pop that up. But these are still active and out there. And these films, there's like 6 films now and tons of resources, which, despite the campaign being over, are still out there to use and still really good pieces of content. So the second aspect was call. So we knew that it wasn't enough to just talk about climate justice within our communities, but we had to take this message out to our political representatives. So that's why the second thing we asked Methodist communities to do was to call on their ambassadors to COP26 to make climate justice for all possible. So this obviously looked very different again in each country because of the way people can successfully engage with their ambassadors. And in Britain, what that looked like was gathering together a group of people who told us what they would like to say to Alok Sharma, who was the president of COP26. He's obviously, because we were hosting it, he's obviously British. And then we wrote this open letter, which then we invited communities to sign and get on board with. So thirdly, the last ask was about commitment. So our final ask invited communities to make personal commitments to enact change within their own lives and contexts. And this was really, really important for us to ensure that the work of the campaign was sustained after COP and that change was truly embedded within communities. Because, and I'm sure you might have sort of noticed, there was a lot of talk about climate. COP was on a lot more radars than it usually is, and people were really ready to talk about these things, but the danger with kind of like this big buzz around climate and COP was that post-November, everyone was going to have Christmas, get together and see in the new year, and then by January, climate would just fall off our agenda. So making sure that we have commitments is a really good way to make sure that we don't just take action in the moment and forget, but have sustained action that is sustainable. So in Britain, we were encouraging communities to sign up to Eco Church and Eco Congregation. So these were if you haven't heard of them, they're really fantastic ways in which churches can get awards for how eco-friendly their churches are. But that's not just about kind of the building and the land, but it's also about worship and teaching as well. So again, it's encouraging this change in the way we do things, the things we buy, the things we own, how we look after our land, but also acknowledging how important the learning is that goes with that, so that we don't just kind of do things and not understand why. So another thing that we did as well in the run-up to COP with people in Britain was trying to encourage them to get involved in Climate Sunday, as well as the Young Christian Climate Network's relay to COP26, which saw people walk the length of this country all the way to Glasgow in unity in support of what Christians could be doing ahead of COP. So yeah, so I'm aware that that was a lot of information. So what I want to do now is we're going to head on to the next slide. And what I want us to think about is how we can start thinking a little bit more about climate justice and what it means for us as individuals, what it means for us in our churches. So it would be ideal if everyone was in sort of like small little groups, so that then we can feed back together. So maybe if people are happy to move into like 2s or 3s, or talk to the people next to you, and we've got 5 minutes to discuss some of these questions. So the questions are there spaces in which you feel most connected to creation? What does stewardship of creation mean to you? What do you think is the church's role in the fight for climate justice? And are there any actions you're currently taking to combat the climate crisis? And obviously, there's no wrong answers here. So feel free to have those conversations, and that also, if the answer to the things like the last question is nothing, that's fine. This is a good place for us to start talking about what we can do about that. And again, I want to just emphasize for the folks online that this is a really good time to think about these questions, but put some of your thoughts and responses in the chat. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes to think and talk about this, and then we'll feed back, if that's all right. So yeah, over to you guys. Okay, if you could just draw your conversations to an end. I always feel really bad when I can see really nice conversation happening, and I just want to let you guys talk forever, but I reckon that wouldn't be very good for all the slides that I spent a long time making if I just stitched the slides now. But yeah, and we're going to just have a few minutes of feeding back. I want to hear what you guys have been talking about. We've had contributions online from David, so thank you so much, David, for sharing. David says, I'm presuming this is in answer to the spaces that you feel most connected to creation. David says, going for a walk in my local park makes me aware of his creation and hearing sparrows and seeing the swans, which is lovely. Does anyone have any? We'll go through the questions, and then it means that everyone's got a chance to contribute. Does anyone have any thoughts on the spaces in which they feel most connected to creation and would like to share? We've got a mic, so anyone? Please be brave. I want to hear what you're talking about. Okay. Oh, you guys did. Is that all right?
Well, we were both talking, actually. We live in the countryside. And so we feel very connected to nature and creation because of where we live. But it also causes tension because we have to use our cars to travel. And so it almost feels like the place that you feel most connected to creation in living in amongst the natural environment, but the necessities mean that you're also almost spoiling it just by living here and just by the necessity of traveling. And it was this kind of so it wasn't totally a kind of positive, this is where we feel happy and lovely. It was a kind of tension for us about the joys of being connected to nature, and also then the kind of burden we put then on the environment around us.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And you've highlighted there the tension that always seems to be the case in when we think about climate is that, especially as you say, for like rural communities who are living potentially spread out from one another, spread out from the things that if you lived in an urban setting would just be so much easier to access. That is a difficult question to like wrestle with and kind of work out what works. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. That was brilliant. Has anyone got anything else to say on that question? Or are we happy to move on? Brill. Okay, so the second question, what does stewardship of creation mean to you? David has very helpfully answered all the questions in separate messages. So he says, it means we should not be selfish and look after God's world around us. So thank you, David. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that one?
Talked about the relationship that we're called or commanded to have with God, with each other, and with the land. And our relationships have broken down, I think, with all of those three areas. In John 3:16, God said that for God so loved the world that he gave his only son. It wasn't just God loved people. He loved the whole world, the cosmos, everything in it. And we are called and commanded to do the same. And it's about that relationship with God, each other, and the land.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, so beautifully illustrated this. And yes, so love the world, I think is so important to hold on to. And I agree with you completely about what does stewardship look like as well, because so much of the things that we've been trying to unpack is the way in which stewardship and dominion over has become a kind of a leeway for people to exploit. And what does that mean? Because that doesn't just have implications on the land, as bad as that is. That also has implications on people too. So yeah, thank you for that. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that they want to share? Okay, cool, no worries. The next question is, what do you think is the church's role in the fight for climate justice? David says, we are called by Jesus to stand with those who have no voices, Isaiah 61. So thank you, David. Do people have thoughts on this one? Yeah? Yeah, go for it.
I think it's sometimes trying to help to overcome indifference, and both within the church and possibly within our own lives and experience as well, but also politically calling to account others who can make decisions.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Does anyone else have anything to say on that point? Oh, I thought you, yeah?
I do think it's really important for us to all live by example and to love creation and to work towards not harming creation in any way and to fighting for justice for people. And I think by example, I don't know if you have an opinion on this, you may not have, but the Methodist Church held their allowed their annual general meeting to be held in Methodist Central Hall. And I don't think that is a good example either. And I think there needs to be change from within, but also, with individuals as well. And it's a fight. It's a real fight.
Yeah. There was a lot of things over 18 months that it is sometimes really difficult when you can see, especially in your own institution, but also sometimes that's the best place to speak from, to be able to say, I thought this is I thought that we were heading towards this, and how come we're still doing these things and calling that out. And that's why for us as well, when part of our ask was about calling on leaders, but then our third ask was about commitment, that's for us was so important because we felt like we couldn't, as a global community, ask our leaders to do better when we weren't prepared to do better either. And actually we felt that it was really powerful to say, we will lead by example, you need to change, we need to change, and this is how we are going to change. What are you going to do about it? That's really important so that we don't just get complacent in our own comfortable kind of ness talking about the climate, but actually calling out things that are difficult to call out is really important. So thank you. And then we can move on to the final question, which is, are there any actions you are currently taking to combat the climate crisis? David says, recycling as much as I can and being more responsible for our planet and showing kindness, which is brilliant. Thank you, David. Does anyone have any thoughts on this one or want to share any stories?
I think in our group we're doing bits. I'm a keen recycler. I know these are keen recyclers. We're thinking about getting an electric car. I think you have with my wife and I have become vegan kind of partly because of the ecological effect and trying to keep down our carbon footprint. But I think that we just felt, well, we're not quite sure what more we can do as individuals. What is there that we can do? And it all becomes, the more you read out about things, the more confusing it gets. Is it best to get rid of your car, the petrol car that still works, and buy an electric car which takes lots of carbon to make it, or is it best to get, and all these questions are extremely vexed, and there's so much information out there. You can find information to argue both sides, and you never quite know what we can do.
Yes, yeah, thank you for that. It is always difficult, I feel, when we do think about the changes that we could make. What, as you said, you don't want to start totally getting rid of things that then causes waste. It is a difficult tension. Again, it comes back to this tension that always seems to be when we talk about climate, of it's never straightforward. And I think that's the thing that is sometimes really obvious about it, but sometimes difficult. And I think as well, when you're saying about working out what we can do, I think that's why community is really important, because sometimes it's really hard to sort of muddle through all of the information. And that's why I've found definitely having a community that you can talk and discuss and unpick all of this stuff. So we're not doing this in isolation. We're doing it with people. I think that always really helps. So thank you for that. Has anyone got anything else to say or would like to contribute before we move on? Cool. That's fine. Thank you. So the next thing I'm just going to show you is a video that some of our volunteers made in the process of making our short films. We were really keen that our volunteers were represented in the film. So this is a film made by some of our volunteers, and we didn't actually ask them to make this one, actually. This was something that they had the skills and the talents for, and we sort of just said, go for it. So it's a song that they wrote, an original song and music video that they made for the campaign, which is really lovely. And yeah, I hope you enjoy. As I sort of said, as much as we were trying to resource people with reflections and prayers and things like that, actually having a lovely song is really nice, and it really captures the campaign and the work of the campaign throughout. So yeah, over to the video.
Our ask to the global Methodist Church. We believe in climate justice for everyone. We have paid the price for more families. Now we're part of the bigger picture. We have committed to be part of the change. As we call our own ambassadors, just to make the climate justice possible for everyone. Droughts, heat waves, cyclones, floods, rise in sea levels. All these problems are due to the changes in climate, and the world is at stake. The climate justice for all is calling to all the global Methodist family to know that we are part of this crisis. We believe in climate justice for all. Let us conserve our environment by protecting creation for the love of all. Let us use clean energy to save the future generations. Methodist youth are leading this movement globally to fight this crisis. For everyone, we have paid the price for more families. Now we're part of the bigger picture. We are committed to be part of the change. As we call our own ambassadors, just to make the climate justice possible for everyone. We believe in climate justice for everyone. We have paid the price for more families. In a very part of the bigger picture. We are committed to be part of the change. As we call our own ambassadors, just to make the climate justice possible for everyone. Together we stand, and we can create a better world.
Yeah, that makes me feel, it really brings back lovely memories of being together, especially at the end of the video where you saw us all together at COP. And I think it demonstrates how exciting it was for us that people from all over the world wanted to contribute their stories and their wisdom to this really, really important conversation. So, yeah. So, obviously, in the lead up of, we've been talking about climate justice, and obviously COP was a really, really important part of that. So I'm going to share a few reflections about kind of how I felt about COP, how we felt as a group. But I thought instead of just hearing me talk about it, I've asked my colleague Irene, who is from Italy. She's going to share her thoughts in a short video before I talk. So over to Irene.
Hello everyone, I'm Irene. I'm based in Italy and I'm one of the foremost campaign workers for Climate Justice for All. In November, I had the opportunity to attend COP26 as well as meeting for the first time in person CJ418, which was actually incredible. And my experience at COP26 was both amazing and overwhelming. And at COP26, I would say that COP26 didn't end well as we expected in terms of goals agreed and ambition that was promised during the campaign for at COP26. So I would say that one of the things that I was really disappointed to was the climate finance, $100 billion promised by rich countries, but no one really kept their promise, as well as the lack of representatives from Global South. I think that these two things, these are some of the things that really I was really disappointed from. But I will also take, we can say, some wins from this COP26, as well as the first time methane was pointed out in the agreement, and as well as the Paris rulebook that enhance more transparency in measuring the carbon emission. So I would say that these are some of the things that really stood up for me at COP26. But I really hope that this COP27 in Egypt will be far way better and far more ambitious than this COP. Thank you.
Wonderful. So, as Irene sort of touched on there, I think a lot of us had quite complicated relationships with COP when we were reflecting on what happened there. Because, as we sort of mentioned, it was the first time as a team that we got together in the flesh. It was wonderful to actually meet people that we'd worked together with for 18 months. And I think the sense of community and the joy of being together after the whole of COP being postponed was so nice, and the atmosphere in that sense was wonderful. But I also felt, again, it was quite a complicated set of feelings because we had access to the Blue Zone at COP, and so we could go behind kind of like the UN lines, and we could go and engage with the stuff that was happening inside the COP building. And I feel really complicated about it, if I'm really honest, because I had a really good time at seminars led by the International Indigenous Peoples Forum. And I sat and I learnt and I listened and I just kind of engaged with all of this stuff that was brilliant, really, really exciting information, and being able to hear from Indigenous people about their relationship with the land, about the work that they're doing. But I feel really complicated about the fact that that forum was an event that was happening, not the main stage where decisions were being made. And actually, my colleague Mima, who she's an Indigenous person from the Pacific, I saw her time and time again being asked to go and speak on panels and share her story. And the case for a lot of people of Indigenous heritage felt like they were being asked to be visible and to show that this was a really inclusive and diverse COP. And yet, as Irene touched on, the results that we kind of got from COP didn't reflect the story, it didn't reflect or kind of do justice to the stories that were being told. And I feel really strangely about that, because I feel, as I mentioned, that me personally, I got to experience a lot of things and I got to learn, and so in some way I feel that I personally benefited from COP. But did the world benefit, and did those Indigenous people who led those sessions benefit from coming, having to rehash a lot of the climate trauma that their communities are seeing, the fact that they're not being listened as much? It leaves a really complicated feel, as I've sort of said throughout this whole thing, in my mind, of where do we go when we actually do invite people, but our actions as a result don't match the severity of the stories we're being told. And so that's a difficult thing that I'm still wrestling with, and I think was definitely the case for my colleagues too. So the question now then is, what do we do post COP26? Obviously, COP wasn't the end of these conversations, and I hope for many people it was just the beginning. But where do we go from here? So I've got some questions, and this one is going to have to be a little bit more quick fire. So if I'm not going to ask you to feedback on this, this is just for you in your groups. There's 2 questions, I think, for each slide. I'm not expecting you to have answered all of them, but kind of maybe pick one question from each slide and think about it. And we're maybe going to have about a minute or so to discuss. So it's really just to start thinking a little bit about what we can do post-COP. But yeah, I'm just going to we'll give you a minute. If you are in the groups that you're in earlier, take a minute, chat about these things. And then, like I said, we're not necessarily going to feed back. This is just for you to start thinking about it. And then we'll go on to the next, and think there's 3. So yeah, and again, for people online, this is just a time for you to reflect before we move on. So we'll give it a minute and then I'll say next one. Okay, cool. Just going to move to the next questions now. So this is about Cole, how you can keep talking to your representatives and things. So again, just have a little think about these questions, but equally, if you're having really good conversation about the last thing, I don't want to cut you off. So just keep going with whatever works for you guys. And we'll just move on to the last set of one question for this one, which is about actions, again, that you and your community can be taken. So hopefully you have some things to say about this one as well, and then we're going to come back together in a few minutes. Okay, I'm just going to bring the conversation again to an end. I hope that that's been, I hope that you've had interesting conversations there and had a chance to kind of reflect on some of these questions. So obviously we've talked a lot about the things that we can do, but as we've sort of mentioned, that this is always wrapped up in the difficulty of feeling frustration and anger that sometimes can leave you feeling very disillusioned and yeah, that's not good. And as kind of as what I've learned from spending the time that I have with my colleagues is that actually so much of what we can be doing as people of faith is making sure that our solutions, our actions are always infused with hope. And actually, without hope for the future, what are we looking for in the future? And so one of the things that we did consistently throughout our campaign was trying to share the hopes for the future that people had, because we think that it helped inspire us to do more, but also to reassure us that we're doing this because we have hope. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give you the chance to think a little bit about your hopes for the future. But what I'm going to do first is, again, go back to my colleague Irene, who's going to share what she has as her hope for the future. So I'm going to pass over to Irene.
I would like to share my hope for the future using just few words. It's our justice and hope. I really pray and I really hope that we will be able to create a sustainable world, a sustainable planet with a just and fair future for the generation that are coming. And I really hope that people, young at heart people, would not feel hopeless. In these days, we hear a lot of news, a lot of things going on, and a lot of people may feel hopeless. But I think that it is important, especially in these times to keep hope, because hope is something that leads us to great achievements, and to also to be united with positive thinking and trying to do our best to not lose it. So I really hope that no one will feel hopeless, and that will make any effort to make and build a just and fair world. Thank you.
Brilliant. And as Irene mentions there, it's so important to have hope, and I think that's not to negate at all climate anxiety, climate grief, climate worry. Those are all really, really valid things, and I think that there's lots of spaces in which we need to acknowledge and reckon with that. But as Irene says, we need to have that, the unity that comes with hope and together is really important. And without our hope, I worry about where that leaves us. So what I'm going to do now is I want to give you a chance to think a little bit about what your hopes for the future are, because I don't want us to leave today feeling overwhelmed and like I've just come and dumped a lot of climate worry on you. So I want to give you a little bit of time to think about what your hope is for the future. And I'm going to give you about 3 minutes or so, and what we're going to show as you think is a song and a music video that, again, our volunteers in Uruguay developed. They were, again, a really artistic bunch of people who made so much art and creative expressions of their kind of work for climate justice. So this is a song called, the English translation of the title is Life Force. And so the music and the song are original, and the dance piece that accompanies it as well is. So it's a beautiful piece, and I hope it helps you to sort of think a little bit about what your hopes for the future are. And afterwards, if people are willing, it would be really nice to share our hopes with one another. And again, if you're watching us online, feel free to share your hope in the chat. But yeah, we're going to listen to this song to give us a little bit of space and time to consider what our hope for the future might be.
Pulso de vida que corre entre cerros, que nace tan dulce, que viene del cielo, que cambia de estado, que moja los prados, que es vida y frescor. Sos savia en el árbol y el jugo del fruto, sos flora talada y fauna en peligro, la esencia del cuerpo que pide con fuerza que viertas tu don. Fuerza que brota entre las rocas, nutre tu pueblo y riega su voz, llanto del cielo, clama la tierra por libertad de la creación. Sustento del mundo en manos mercantes que riegan el hambre y cosechan la sangre, que niegan el cambio, lo sucio del aire por su producción. Agua de vida por Dios prometida, que vuelve y activa el ciclo de vida, que cambia los rostros de tu humilde pueblo cuando oyen tu voz. Fuerza que brota entre las rocas, nutre tu pueblo y riega su voz, llanto del cielo, clama la tierra por libertad de la creación.
La creación espera con gran impaciencia el momento en que se manifieste claramente que somos hijas e hijos de Dios.
So yeah, I wonder if anyone would like to kick us off by telling us what their hope for the future is. But I could start actually with those of us who are joining us online. So we have hope that poverty can be ended, and that people recognise climate needs to be a top priority, and a separate one is disconnection is connected in relationships with and in our world. Does anyone else have anything that they would like to share? Yeah.
I think for me, hope is more than just what I'd like to see. And if I'm totally honest, I'm not totally sure about what's going to happen with climate change. I don't know. I could say I think it's going to get sorted. I think it's going to be okay. So I can't. So my hopes are really based in the sure knowledge that God will restore creation. And this is not to diminish what we're doing or what needs to be done, but even when it seems dark, and actually creation will be restored. God's not forgotten about us, even if we mess it up, and we get stuck in this mire that we're in. God is there, and He is going to restore creation, and it's going to be beautiful. And I think that's the one thing I can put my total and utter hope in, without wavering, because it relies on God and not on human contributions and on human desires and human frailties and failings. So that would be my biggest hope.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any hopes that they would like to share? Anyone?
I'm sure we've all got lots of hopes, but one hope of mine is that technology will find a way to reverse some of the effects of climate change. And my biggest hope is that our grandchildren will be able to grow up in a world where life for them can continue, and that they can have hope for the future, and that they don't look back and see that we have done nothing to build a better future for them.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anyone else have anything else before we wrap up? No? That's okay. Thank you. Just before I end, I just want to say again, thank you all so much for coming. It's been really nice to share this space and this time with you. And as I said at the beginning, I know that there's lots going on today, so I'm really grateful that you chose to come and spend time here and thinking about the climate crisis. I want to say a big thank you as well to obviously my former colleagues who have contributed in various different ways to this session as well, despite them not being here, particularly Irene, who sent us those videos. So thank you very much to Irene, and a big thank you to everyone who has made this possible at the back, the tech team. This all wouldn't be as slick and as cool as it is without them, because I'm not very good with tech. So thank you all for coming, and I'm just going to end in a prayer that Irene wrote, actually, and it's a prayer that I use all the time, and I think it speaks into so much of what we've talked about today. So let us pray. Lord Almighty, you are present in the whole universe and in every creature. Open our hearts with the power of your love, that we may protect life and the beauty of creation. Fill us with peace, that we may live as brothers and sisters, harming no one. God, help us to free the abandoned and forgotten. Fill us with hope, so that we may protect the world, our home, that we may see beauty and not pollution and destruction. Fill with love the hearts of those who look only for gain at the expense of the poor and of the earth. Teach us to discover the worth of each thing, so it may find the light given by your Holy Spirit. Let's remember that we are united with every creature. We thank you for being with us each and every day. Give us hope in our struggle for justice, love, and for peace. Amen. Thank you.